Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we're in our 24th season, I interview poets and sometimes other writers and artists about their craft, what they've produced recently, how they got there, what they might be planning for the future. It's a pretty wide net. We've had on poets and journalists and bloggers. We've also had on musicians, actors, sculptors. If you have an idea for an artist who might be good for the Writer's Block, poet or writer or other shape of creative person, watch for our address at the end of the show. We'd be glad to get your suggestions. I also want to remind you that this production, as well as all the programs that come out of Cape Ann TV, are a result of the Cape Ann local community contributions because of cable TV. Remember that later when you see your next Dish ad. You don't get this with Dish. I'm very happy to say tonight that we do have a writer. Her name is Lori Riddell Geary, and I'm going to use part of her profile from the back of her book to describe her background for you. She grew up in La Jolla, California, where she spent most of her time at the beach, swimming and watching surfers. She also spent time at her aunt's ranch in Alpine, where she rode horses and climbed rocks. She attended Mary Washington College and then graduated from the University of Virginia at the other coast with a B.S. in education. Later, she attended BU, graduating with a master's in education. Much later, she became a professional certified life coach, and she has taught high school English and Spanish. She has been a guidance counselor. For years, she was an instructor for Outward Bound, and she's had many other illustrious careers. I'm not going to read them all because I want to get to Lori and talk to her. Welcome to the Writer's Block, Lori.
Thanks. Nice to be here, John.
Thanks for coming down.
Yes.
I'm going to show your book first. We're going to just plug the daylights out of it. This is Dancing Through Cancer. How does that look? I'm going to ask my camera person, Liz, if that shows up well. That's good. You were diagnosed with cancer, and this is partly a result of that.
Yes, definitely a result of that. Yes.
A direct result of that. And I know dancing is one of your main therapies, if not the main therapy.
Right.
Can you tell us in background, I'm kind of racing ahead because I was going to ask about California. I'll get back to California.
Yeah.
Can you tell us some of the background of determining that you had cancer, or how you became suspicious and how you went in and what that process was like?
Well, I went to on a routine mammogram, and they found breast cancer, although it was called DCIS, ductal carcinoma in situ, and now they're calling that precancerous. So nowadays they would mostly just watch that, but because of that, they needed to take an X-ray of my lung in preparation for the lumpectomy. So when they took the X-ray of my lung, they found lung cancer. So
it was like complete surprise.
It was a complete surprise. I had no symptoms. It was just a routine mammogram, and there's no history of lung cancer or any kind of cancer in my family. I was just totally shocked.
You don't smoke?
No, I'd never been a smoker, so would not ever expect it to be lung cancer. If it was some kind of cancer, probably would have expected it to be a serious kind of breast cancer. But
and that, what year was that again?
That was 5 years ago. So I've been on this journey now for over 5 years, 5.5 years.
5.5 years.
Yeah, 2008.
There's a wonderful paragraph in here about you getting the news. I asked before the show started if you could read that for
Okay,
us,
sure.
Let me see. It's very poignant for any of us who have been through that kind of bad telephone conversation.
Okay, it's called My Story. You have lung cancer. My surgeon had just called to tell me this after reading my chest X-ray taken in preparation for a scheduled breast lumpectomy. I remember standing all alone in my condo, holding the phone in shock, having my first out-of-body experience, thinking, this isn't real, this isn't happening to me. I am a non-smoker. There was no family history of lung cancer, and I had always lived a healthy lifestyle, I thought. I immediately got on the phone and started calling my family and close friends who reacted in the same shocked way. And then they started taking care of me as they continue to care for me now. I couldn't manage this journey without them.
Okay, so 5 years ago you began, as you say, this journey.
Yeah.
And now you look as healthy as I remember you from 5 or 6 years ago.
Right.
And earlier than that. Describe, if you can, without giving away everything in the book, because we want everybody to go out and buy the book.
Right.
Describe, if you can, some of the high points of that long, 5 year.
The high point or the low points?
Well, maybe the low points are the high points.
Right, exactly. Well, at first, and I'm sure this is the case for many people who get diagnosed with cancer, there's just a series of all sorts of tests, and that part is very unpleasant, uncomfortable, painful at times, and scary because there's a lot of unanswered questions. But right away they got me into surgery. I mean, they discovered it in March. By June, I was in surgery. They took out the top lobe of my right lung because there was a big tumor there, and I had a smaller tumor in the bottom lobe, and they took that out. And so that was really difficult, going through surgery, and then after surgery, then I had to rest a bit. Well, fortunately for me, my older son and my family, my grandchildren, they happened to be living in Boston area for that time frame, so I was able to go recuperate at their house.
I forgot to mention from your intro that you live in Gloucester now.
I do live in Gloucester now.
And the surgery and diagnosis took place
Mass General.
In Boston at Mass General.
Right, but at the time I was diagnosed, I was living in Boston. I was living very close to Mass General, living alone. So, but it was so nice to have my family there, to be able to stay at their house while I recuperated from the surgery. And then after I recuperated from the lung surgery, then I had to have the breast lumpectomy. After that, I went through a whole series of radiation treatments, which is every day for 6 weeks. And actually, got it all mixed up here. The chemotherapy came first after the surgery. Then I had chemotherapy, which was horrible. You sit in a chair all day. I had an infusion. I sat in a chair all day. And then they'd wait 3 weeks, and I did that 4 times. So we scheduled the surgery, we scheduled the chemotherapy on a Friday. My friends helped me figure that out so that my friends would take care of me on the weekends. I would go to different friends' houses up here in Gloucester. My friends were incredible about that. And I got progressively sicker from the chemo, which was awful. Because
I found it interesting, and I think you mentioned this earlier, they don't, but they don't go in and do everything at once. Like they wouldn't do lung surgery and lumpectomy on the same
No, they
visit.
couldn't, no. I mean,
get it all over with.
Tuesday, I think that would be
we'll
too
do it
much.
Tuesday morning, and you'll be back on the tennis court by Wednesday.
Yeah,
that kind
no.
of fantasy.
That lung surgery was just the worst thing. The recovery from that, it was 6 weeks. I could have taken more time than 6 weeks, but it was really difficult to come out of that surgery, to recover from it. Now, the lumpectomy was really a piece of cake. So, but they were totally different things. And normally they might do radiation for women once they've done a lumpectomy, but they didn't with me because they knew they were going to do radiation for the lung, and they can't give you that much radiation. A scary thing that one of the doctors said to me about that was they wanted, in case they had to do further radiation, they didn't want to do it on my breast. So that's not great news to know that I might have to have radiation later. I mean, that's one of the things about cancer that's very scary, is just the unknown, just not knowing what's going to happen next.
I learned to respect the doctors who gave you the straight answer. we don't know.
Yes.
Sometimes because the research isn't there, the data's not there,
Right.
and all the cases are individual.
Well, actually, I think they say they don't know because if you look at the research so far and the statistics so far, especially for lung cancer, it's not good. And so if they told me what the research was and what the statistics are, it would be pretty hard to hear. I mean, I've been, of course, reading about it and learning about it and finding out, how rare it is to survive lung cancer
You were
as
diagnosed-
long as I have.
You were diagnosed at stage 4.
I was diagnosed at stage 3, but then what happened is after it turned into stage 4 because after they did the surgery, the chemo, the radiation, which took months, it was June to probably February. Then I had some follow-up checkups where each time there were things in the lungs they weren't too pleased with, but then they'd go away and other things would pop. But then the next January, I thought I was fine because my follow-ups had been fine. So I actually had planned to go to Costa Rica for the winter, and I was just completely confident that all of that, since I'd been through so much, that of course it must have gotten rid of it all. And I went in alone to an appointment, and it was a CAT scan, and they told me, we're sorry, it's back in your right lung and also in your left lung, which then that's really bad news because then you know it's just metastasized. And so then it was stage 4.
And what period was that? Or what date was that?
So that was January of 2009. And so
So
then,
this is 10 months later. Right?
yeah. And so then they wanted to check my brain because lung cancer especially likes to go to the brain. So this time I knew to have a friend go with me. After this, I always had friends with me at my doctor's appointments and at my procedures. So I had to go and have this surgery, which there's good pictures in the book here, this stereotactic radiosurgery where they screw a big metal halo into your head and then they screw that to the table because they want to keep you super still. And then they shoot these x-rays or radiation to the spot where there was just one little tumor in there, which is amazing that they can do that because otherwise they would have to do brain surgery. So they do that, and so they apparently got that tumor. So
Let me just interrupt there. You mentioned that there are pictures in the book.
Yes.
And we're not going to hold them up. They're a little faint for us to pick up well.
Right.
But I want to use that as a segue to the book to mention some of the outlines here. You have an introduction and then your story about how you were diagnosed, and then a section on lung cancer, which you've just visited now, and then a section called, as the book is called, Dancing Through Cancer,
right.
and living with loss, the environment, self-healing, support system, spirituality, future planning, death and dying, which none of us can avoid sometimes, a conclusion, and then some good lists of resources of books and movies and websites.
Right.
When you were going through that first section, lung cancer,
Right.
did you have the idea for this book in mind?
Well, what happened when I first got this diagnosis, my immediate thought was my grandchildren are not going to know me.
I remember you mentioned that in the book.
Yes. And so I started thinking, well, I want them to know me, so what can I do so that they can get to know me? So I thought, well, I'm going to start writing about my journey, about my experience. So I started writing a blog. Somebody helped me with that. And so I started writing a blog about what was going on. So this book has come from that blog. I've been writing the blog for 5 years, and it started out with I wanted my grandchildren to know me, but then I realized that this information could help other cancer patients, not just lung cancer, but of course it is mostly information about lung cancer, but it could help other cancer survivors as well as their caregivers.
Well, with your attitude, if nothing else, that
Well,
you're gonna fight it and search for ways to deal with it
Right.
and heal as best you can, rather
Right.
than lie down and say,
Right.
I'm a goner.
Yeah,
the blog is up, by the way, as a super on the screen during our show.
Okay.
So that's running still.
The blog is running still, and people can actually get the information that's in the book is at the blog. So you can go read anything there if you want instead of buying the book.
Oh, don't tell them that.
Don't tell them that. I don't. Yeah.
Can you find out how to buy the book on the blog?
Yes, you can go to Amazon, basically.
So
this book is at Amazon.
Dancing Through Cancer's available
right,
on
and
Amazon.
it's available a Kindle edition or a print-on-demand edition. But I realized, once I wrote this too, that this book really can help anyone in terms of ways to stay healthy, to do what we can to prevent cancer. Because when I read all these facts about cancer, it's pretty scary. The number, how it's growing, cancer is growing, we're getting more and more cancer victims as we go. It's really it's not improving. I was reading some of the facts before I came tonight, and they're saying one in 3 people will get cancer in their lifetime now. So that's pretty remarkable. So
despite all the research and all the publicity we hear about pushing for this research facility and that research, cancer is not diminishing.
Cancer is not diminishing, according to everything I'm reading. And another thing, Chris, since I'm talking about lung cancer kills more people than breast, prostate, and colon cancer combined. Lung cancer, and there's a chart in here that shows that lung cancer's deaths are here, and these others are down here. Lung cancer kills more women than breast cancer. People are usually really surprised at that.
You don't see the constant publicity about lung cancer as you do about breast cancer.
You don't, and I think and lung cancer gets the least amount of research and money toward research. So I think one of the reasons is you asked me, and I'm sure people, if they don't ask me, they're thinking it, well, were you a smoker? And I think one of the reasons that there isn't research money is because they've sort of decided it's because people smoke, therefore we don't need to do research, we know it's from smoking. But the reality is only 30% of people get lung cancer who smoke. There's about 40% of people who get lung cancer never smoked. And the kind of lung cancer I have is it's non-small cell lung cancer. There's small cell lung cancer. My understanding, anyway. I think I have my facts right, but small cell lung cancer is for smokers. Non-small cell lung cancer is non-smokers. And now, more and more people are getting this. Especially, it seems to me like there's a lot of women in their 40s that are getting lung cancer, and why are they getting it? That's what we need to have research about why people are getting lung cancer who aren't smokers. Because my theory is it has a lot to do with our nutrition, which there's not, and there is a lot of research about nutrition and how that contributes to the links with cancer and nutrition. So I talk about, there's a big chunk in here about nutrition facts and why that is so, or what the links are.
Well, our atmosphere is also very, very polluted. So even if you don't smoke, you're breathing in a lot of toxins anyway.
Right. And there's nothing we can do about that. I mean, that was the thing too. It's like, when I got this, it's like, well, what can I do? And that was the first thing I thought of. Well, I can look at what I eat or what I don't eat. That I had no real sense of my diet. And of course, now I've been all that I've learned about diet and nutrition since I've been reading about it and gone to workshops these last 5 years is how bad my diet really was. And so who knows if that contributed. I believe it would have. I mean, I think I was reading somewhere that they're talking about cancer is the modern disease because of all, the things, our diet as well as the environment. But I think if you look at environment and smoking, it takes the responsibility away from us. And I think we can do a lot to be healthier and try to prevent cancer from happening. Because cancer is really a disease. Another thing is, for many of us, cancer is a disease of aging because our immune system gets weaker when we're older. And so what happens is that cancer, we have little cancer cells all the time, but our immune system's constantly killing it. But as we get older, our immune system weakens. And if we haven't done things to strengthen it, we're very susceptible.
Is there a problem, I've heard this mentioned by counselors, a problem of creating guilt if we make cancer too much our own responsibility, and then
Right.
we get it anyway.
Well,
and you think,
right.
well, I failed. It's my fault.
Well, then
that
that's
I
a
got
really
cancer.
good point.
Is that
exactly?
Is that a problem with people you know who are ill?
Well, I don't know if that's a problem, but certainly it's one, and that's in a way what I'm talking about with the smoking. It's like people will say, well, if you, I mean, I don't think it's really fair to blame smokers who get lung cancer, like, well, you knew better. I mean, no one deserves to get cancer. So there's been a link also, I talk about this, one of my blogs is about stress, and there's a very well-known doctor whose name I can't think of right now, who tied stress was how people would get heart disease, and stress was how people would get cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's putting the blame on the victim. So yeah, I don't want to come across that way, because I'm thinking more in terms of just our responsibility. What can we do to be healthy and to try to navigate through this?
Now, I know from your book that one of the things we could do to navigate through this is dance.
Yeah.
And you have
Why dancing?
striving to be lung cancer free on your T-shirt.
Yes.
What else besides dancing and a
Well,
positive attitude do you mention in your book, or could you mention?
I'll
right now
talk
on the
about
show?
and I have a whole section on dancing. So I was going to call this, living with cancer, but my friends know how much I love to dance, and somebody said, why don't you call it Dancing Through Cancer? And so dancing for me is something that helps me get through this, if you will. I mean, it's something that brings me a lot of joy. When I go partner dancing, or Zydeco dancing mostly, and it's couple dancing, and I give you 20 reasons in there why I like it. But mostly it's about the being in the moment, being in the flow with the music, connected with other people. But I think really it's a metaphor for anyone. I think we all need to find something that brings us passion. And that is what brings us joy and passion in our life, to make us feel fulfilled, and life needs to be fun.
That's interesting. So the passion is the thing. So if somebody else says, I want to volunteer for archaeological digs, which I know is really popular.
Right.
That could be the passion.
That could be their dance.
I just got from our camera person, Liz, a 5-minute signal. There's a couple of things I want to get to really quickly.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
You mentioned that I'm going to hold the book up again. Dancing Through Cancer by Lori Geary is available on Amazon.
On Amazon.
In hard copy or Kindle?
Yeah, either one, yes.
And where else is it available?
Oh, it's going to be available at the bookstore in Gloucester.
In Gloucester?
Yes, people can go there and get a copy, and it will be available there soon.
So, and Christmas is coming up.
Right, yes.
A good gift. You hope people don't get cancer, but this, from my own experience, I know this is a really positive book and a very, very helpful book. There's one last quick thing I'm interested in. You mentioned chemo brain.
Oh, right.
And I thought that was a myth, too, before I went through chemo, but it's not.
It's definitely not. It's definitely a reality. Certainly talking to other cancer survivors and stuff, that it makes sense. I mean, we have all these chemicals going through our body, and it definitely does affect our brain. And yes, I have a posting in there about aging. We have the forgetfulness, and chemo just adds to that.
These are the chemo, the chemicals you wouldn't go within a million miles of if you didn't absolutely have to.
Exactly.
I mean, they're highly toxic.
Yeah. So in the book, I try to talk about all the different ways that I have tried to live through this, and in many ways, I think I've become a better person. Many of my friends will say that.
Liz just gave me the 3-minute signal.
Okay.
I'm going to have to begin to wrap up.
Okay.
I want to say that I enjoyed Dancing Through Cancer very much. And I know that you've been through a tremendous struggle, because I know you personally over the last 5 years. And I know that anybody who has cancer and goes through any kind of chemo, you don't want to go through it again. And you need help, you need friends, you need a positive attitude if you're going to survive. And I want to recommend to all our viewers that they get your book,
all right.
Dancing Through Cancer. This is the book by Lori Geary. And I want to thank you very much for coming down tonight, Lori.
Okay, thank you, John. It's been great.
If
being
you've
here.
learned something about dancing through cancer, living with cancer, surviving cancer from Lori Geary tonight and from her book, then the Writer's Block has done its job. It was great to have you with us, and I hope to see you again next week on the Writer's Block. Good night.